Howdy, Sergey Drachev from Sergey Drachev Photo here. Sorry for the mess I'm inside my transport truck, or as they're called, semi, because that's what I do when I'm not filming or taking pictures. And I got a new camera. This is my Nikon 200-500 f5.6 lens. I love this one. And I just got Nikon D7500, D7500. Sorry for the mess. I was just charging my my Panasonic. That's another camera I'm using. It's a Panasonic 580 W580, and we are recording with a GoPro Session 5. I'm in Pennsylvania, just south of I-79 and 80, and there's a big wildlife reserve near me. So I parked my truck and I want to go. I wanted to drop my trailer and just drive the truck because it's like 3 miles or 5 kilometers, but I don't want to leave my trailer here. I'm loaded with an oversized load. This truck stop is very small, you know. But anyway, I just want to say that, you know, I started this channel. I had all kinds of Nikon cameras before. I tried full frame, this and that, but before I stumbled into wildlife photography, and I found that's what I finally discovered what I like shooting is scenery and nature, and of course for that full frame would be great. But wildlife, you know, like all these live, moving, exciting objects, animals, birds, I love shooting that. And so I had D750 with a useless Sigma 17 to 50 millimeter lens, and so I sold the Nikon for a pretty good price. Actually, yeah, that's one thing about full frame cameras, that they don't lose their value. And so I sold that one, and and then I sold the Sigma, which was harder to do for some reason, and I got this lens, and I got D7200, which was like 1,100 bucks, and this was $1,700. That's Canadian. I'm in Canada, you know. And at first that Nikon was pretty good because I was still learning, you know. Of course, first taking just, you know, pictures of birds sitting on a branch doing nothing. But once I started, you know, I got more confidence, and I started shooting flying birds, for example. I found that the D7200, the focusing system just was not, you know, on that level. Like, I was getting lots of blurry images, even though, you know, I checked and rechecked my settings. I was working on my technique, you know, mostly shooting in aperture priority with increased ISO, like minimum, so the shutter speed was always pretty good. Like, you know, most, like if it's flying bird, I was striving for, let's say, 800 ISO and about 1/2000th of a second, like, you know, like what they recommend for fast moving objects. And some of the shots, as you can see on my Facebook page, you know, I got some nice shots of those herons in Cambridge, but they were barely moving, you know, like where they were landing or something. And so the focusing system was weak. There was no group focus mode, which I really liked on D750, and then before that I had D810. So no group focusing mode, which really helps when you track moving, you know, animal, because it's 5 points which act as one, so it's much more sensitive, you know. And so weak tracking, no group focus, and 6 frames a second, which sounds a lot, right? But D750 was doing 5, and that's what I learned, that it's not that critical. You can, you know, do well with the 3 frames a second, but what happens is that let's say you try to take a picture of a flying bird, and those things, you know, they really move, you know, like their wings change position so frequently that when you look at the final image, you know, if your camera can only do 3 frames per second, you won't have many shots to choose from, you know. Whereas if your camera can do 10, let's say, or at least 8 or 7, you'll have much more, you know, candidates. Like you can choose from different wing positions, you know, different, you know, head position, you know, the bird, which way the bird was looking, you know. And that's why professional photographers, they all use this expensive cameras with lots of frames per second. And that's thing number 3 that was lacking on D7200. So 6 frames per second is not enough. No group AF and weak focusing system. So a few months ago I did a review, just kind of like a paper review of D7200 and D500 when it just came out, and I was basing my you know, estimates on a DxO Mark, because that camera is way overpriced in my opinion, you know. It's still a crop sensor camera, and surprisingly DxO Mark did not find, you know, lots of good data in their results when they were testing for ISO and sharpness with different lenses. Actually, the numbers, the lab results, were less than those of D7200. Well, they didn't test 7200, but they tested 7100 and D5300 Nikon, right? I don't think they tested 55, no, 56. So the results from the lab were kind of like mediocre, you know, like nowhere near, let's say, D750 or especially D810. But, and so that's what I was saying, hey, it's a bad camera. But then, you know, once you start shooting wildlife, you realize that the image quality is not actually that important, because, okay, Nikon, the 7200 can make actually better images, like the dynamic range, the sharpness with the same lens, if you look at DxO Mark. But what's the point of having a sharp image potentially if your camera cannot grab a focus from a flying bird, you know? And that's where D500 of course shines, because it's 10 frames a second and it has a bunch of focusing points, like 3 times that of a D7200, and that's what you want. And it has you know, improved metering system, and that also helps with it helps the focusing system to focus correctly. And that's what I wanted to get, but it's like still over here in Canada it's $2,700 plus tax, which is 13%, so it's pretty much like $3,000. And I don't care where you live, but I'm paid in Canadian dollars, so $3,000 is $3,000. You know, you can buy 3 cars for that price. And then this baby came up, 1,700 bucks, so 1,699 plus tax came to around 1,900 Canadian bucks. You know, now that's more reasonable. And so I just picked this up on Friday and played with it, and basically the major reason is they added the group AF. So the focusing system itself is still the same as on D7200, still like 51 points. I think 15 cross type, but now we have group AF, and they changed the metering system is the same as on D500, so it should track better because of that, and also the exposure should be correct more often, right? And also they added a touch screen, articulating screen, kind of like on what you see on you know, on D750 and D500, and it's touch, so it shoots 4K video and it shoots 1080p at 60 full sensor size, but it's only 20 megapixels, or more like 21. Whereas the D7200, you have to use a 1.3 crop to get to 60 frames on 1080. So this has better basically movie capabilities, and so 8 frames a second, which is not 10, but it's more than 6. I'll take that. And the metering system, right? And what else? And it's lighter and smaller, because now the camera is mostly made out of carbon fiber, right? The grip is bigger. Like it looks, you know, it feels nice, but pretty much the same features. Oh, and one more interesting thing is that when I looked at DxO Mark, you know, they didn't test this with lenses, but they have section cameras, and all cameras are sorted in based on ISO performance, which that column is called sports, and then dynamic range and portraits, which is testing the color, like color rendition, you know, how rich is the color. And then there's something else. Oh, and I think overall. And so surprisingly, even though Nikon claims they're using the same sensor and the same processor, which of course are different than in 7200, so it's the same, they're claiming it's the same as in D500, but for some reason DxOMark test found that the results of this camera were better than those of D500, you know. And so yeah, ISO performance is better, like you can shoot quality photo at a high ISO, almost by 100 ISO than on D500. The dynamic range is I think pretty much the same, but like other numbers are a bit better too, like on D500. But I was mostly looking at this ISO because I find that that's very critical, you know. That tells you the amount of noise you get, you know, when the light is not perfect. So that's great. So until now, the best one crop sensor Nikon in this regard was a D7500, ladies and gentlemen, a cheap camera. And I had that one, and I remember I was shooting at night, like lights, you know, in the Niagara Falls, Ontario, and I saw like the colors are very rich, you know. And actually I used that camera to take a shot of there's a Murray Street over there, and there's a bridge, and in the distance you see American Falls, like on the American side. And I just used a nice lens, 85mm 1.8, and that 5500 produced like some really, you know, nice colors in vivid mode right from the camera. Actually, I sold, one guy bought postcards with that image. I made like, I think $1. And some gentleman from Texas, thank you very much, bought a small print with that particular Murray Street view from the top, where you see like the winding road, and in the distance you see the fall. It's like it was in winter. And again, crop sensor camera with an 85mm prime lens, and I made a sale, you know. Whereas with these expensive cameras I had before, D810, D750, okay, I sold one also, again, Niagara Falls. It was D750, and it was 24-105 Sigma. I shot in black. There was one of those, you know, ships, what do we call, like a boat, right, with people that want to look at the falls and get wet. So I did that in black and white, and it was a nice cloudy day, like today. It was blue sky with nice white clouds, and in black and white, you know, the falls, the ship, and just looks amazing. And I think I made $10 on that one. Yeah, sold it through pixels.com on my website if you want to check it out. My page, Sergey-Drachev, pixels.com. So anyway, so crop, there's nothing wrong with crop sensor. You know, you can shoot landscapes, you can shoot anything. And what I like is that, especially for wildlife, right, for, you know, for faraway objects, is that now this lens 200-500 becomes 300-750, and I can still use 1.3, you know, crop if I want to. But for now, I just set up the camera yesterday. I charged the battery, and it looks like it uses the same battery as D7200, but it's just, for some reason, I checked the markings because I have a spare one, but for some reason this one is gray, whereas the previous ones were all black or dark gray, like it's a different color. So I don't know, I hope my old battery will work, because I paid like $99 for a spare, because they say don't use third-party batteries because they never work. So I bought an expensive, you know, Nikon. And I'm gonna also, I'm interested to see how different picture controls work. So also what they added here is now there's an auto picture control, and some people on YouTube said it pretty much works like standard, but I want to see that. I want to find a good scene and then just take some shots, you know, like in standard, vivid, landscape, and then see on the computer what the difference is. But for now we're just gonna go, I'm gonna probably put on some long pants, because there's gonna be lots of mosquitoes in there. I just hope I'll be able to see something from the road here. It's highway, I think, 422, and I'm looking at my GPS. On the screen it shows all this green area and lots of water, so I think I can probably find something over there, and we'll continue the testing, the real-life testing. This is what looks like a nice camera, you know, $1,000 Canadian cheaper than D500. You know, pretty good features. I'm eager to check it out. Let's get going.